Hello, hello. We are live. Kevin, we will get started in just a few moments here. Everyone who is joining us today, and I already see folks joining in the comments, I am so excited. I'm Aaron Roy from Tchbl, but today I get the chance to host a workshop with Kevin Shen. Today we're going to be covering how to film professional looking videos at home. So for everyone joining today, we have some incredible content coming to you from a real expert in his actual field. We'll get started in just a few moments. If you've never been on a workshop before, this is your first with Tchbl, we welcome you. Please let us know in the comments that you can hear us. Please let us know where you're joining us from. And me and Kevin will just make sure our audio is all good to go before I kick it to him. So Kevin, say a few words.
Hey, can you hear me? Hello, hello, hello.
Mic check. You sound great on my side. Let's just make sure in the comments that folks can hear us. I'm hearing that we look good, we sound good. That's important. And just to let you know, Kevin, where some of these folks are writing in from, because I can see the YouTube live comments. I see California, Germany, Portland, Novato, New Jersey, Mississippi, Texas, Italy. Good evening to the folks joining us from Italy today. UK as well, Dubai, Oregon, more Italy, Colorado, Afghanistan. I mean, this is incredible. We appreciate everyone joining us here from all over the place. Before I kick it to you, Kevin, just a few technical housekeeping things. For anyone who joins us late today, have no fear. There will be a replay available. Also, if you have any questions for Kevin, there will be time for Q&A at the end. Kevin's got some content he's going to go through for his workshop, but there will be time for Q&A. So don't feel bad if you have any questions. There will be a chance to ask them. And again, I cannot stress enough, there will be a replay. It's the question we get asked most because folks join 10 minutes late. And if there's anything that Kevin covers today that you want to go back and rewatch, feel free. This is YouTube. Like, you can always fast forward back to the live, and don't feel bad that you're going to go back to make sure you got a note taken correctly on something. With that, Kevin, I've had a chance to talk to you briefly before today's workshop and in the lead up to this. And me and people from my team, we've already started to ask you questions how we can do a better job lighting up our own home studios. What I would love for the folks who might not know you is, can you give us a little bit about your background before you launch into this presentation today? And whenever you're ready, just let me know. I'll bring your presentation on the screen. With that, Kevin, the floor is yours.
Sure. Yeah. So hey guys, my name is Kevin. Thanks so much for joining today. I know you all have a lot of stuff to do, so I appreciate you taking the time to hang out with us. This is also the first time I've ever done a live. I was talking with Aaron backstage for a second. So to be honest, I'm a little bit nervous. So appreciate you guys bearing with me. It's so good to see where all of you are from. So hello to my fellow Californians out there. Yeah, so I guess we can just dive in. I have a super quick intro in the slides.
Just brought them up.
Yeah, so super quick hello. And really quick what we're going to be learning today. Aaron basically mentioned everything. I'm going to try to pack as much as I possibly can into this 1 hour so that you have as much as you possibly need. But just know that this topic goes a lot deeper. So we're going to probably be rushing through a bunch of stuff. But like Aaron said, there's a replay, so if you don't catch anything, feel free to go back. And yeah, so my name is Kevin. I'm a YouTuber, aka I sit alone in my room in front of a camera on the internet and pretend to be cool and all that. But really, what I do on YouTube is I make stuff about teaching people how to set up a studio like this one. But really, where my passion lies, it's really trying to tackle this bigger problem, I think, of loneliness and disconnection that we have as human beings. And I think it's something that not a lot of people let on to, but is becoming a growing thing. And I think this is where video is so powerful, because it's not like writing. It's not like just like a photo. You really get that interaction, right? You get that sense that the person is there with you. And this is why it's so, I think, powerful to be talking about this kind of stuff, because it's all about creating a space where your viewer feels like they matter, where they're connecting with you. And so that's kind of the background going into this. And so if there's anything I could ask of you all, it's just to be kind of thinking through that as we go through this content, how you can show up for people who are your audience, not just as numbers and not just as opportunities to make money or to make you be famous, but really think about them as people and how you can kind of reach them as such. So real quick, super obvious slide, but essentially it kind of boils down to this. I like to think about this a lot. This is a paraphrase of a quote that I heard, I forget where, but basically people follow and buy from people that they have a relationship from, right? And I think the line goes, so therefore, all else being equal, just go make more relationships, make more friendships with people. And that's how you're going to succeed, especially in a crowded world like ours, where everyone is jumping on YouTube and in courses and such. And so how do we do that with video, right? How do we create a place where people belong and are taken care of? And I kind of think about it as building a campfire relationship with your audience. And what I mean by that is when you're at a campfire, you're not talking down to people. You're not overly concerned with kind of your status and all these other externalities, right? You're just talking as equals, sharing the pieces of you that you would normally just share with a friend. And that's really what draws people in. And so we want to create that with our space. It's not exactly the first thing you might think of when you're thinking about designing a space, but this is really why it's so key, because we act, we buy, we follow from our feelings first. As much as we think about logic, it's really how we feel about someone that makes us take that next step. So this, again, is the just like super quick context before we dive into it. But when you nail this correctly, you end up with an audience that really cares. So shout out to any of you in the audience who know me from YouTube. I appreciate all of you. And you also end up with a bunch of people who really want to buy what you have. And it becomes this really beautiful thing when you're really just taking care of the people that are following you. And how we accomplish this is what we're going to go through today. So everything from lens, camera, lighting, color, background design, and all that stuff. So that was just a super quick little context for you all. So now I think the main thing when it comes to studio design is people often come to me and ask, like, why do my videos not look so great? Right? I have these ideas in my head of all the stuff I want to make, and it's going to be awesome. And then when I sit in front of the camera, I look like garbage. And then I don't feel like I want to do this anymore. And it gets really confusing and very intimidating when you first start, if you don't really have a key North Star to follow. And what I tell everyone that I work with and teach is everything you do is based on a guiding principle that I want to share with you today. And in order to understand that, I've kind of made it all smart and intellectual looking, but this is what I call the cinematic design pyramid. And pretty much the thing at the top is kind of the main goal, right? Our most important job as people making videos, showing up on screen, and designing this space that we're basically designing an experience for our audience. And that number one job that everything goes back to is we're guiding the viewer's attention, right? And it's not just informational brain attention, it's the heart attention. So it's information plus the feelings. And the fundamental tool, this is the key point, the fundamental tool we use to guide that attention is depth, right? So to help you understand a little bit more of what that is, it's helping people understand what is important and what is not. So whether that's your audio, whether that's, you know, with your camera, but even with your visuals, right? That's what we're talking about here. It's how do we show people what's important to look at? So when they're looking at a bunch of clutter, they're not like, oh my God, what's going on? And then they're confused and they leave and click to another video. Instead, if you help them see, okay, this is important, and slowly feed them very digestible content visually, it helps people feel a lot more at ease, a lot more comfortable with you, a lot easier to trust you. And so we want to take this and we want to design our entire visuals around that. And so just to go through some of it, again, I don't know if we have time to go through all of it, but just basically stuff like sharpness versus blur. Our eyes naturally gravitate to what's sharp on screen. And so we can use our lens, like we'll talk about in a little bit, and positioning ourselves with distances to make sure that we're sharp on camera and everything else is slightly blurry. This mimics what the eye sees and is a lot more natural for people. So people feel a lot more comfortable interacting with your content. And then static and movement. As you can see, I've got a lot of nervous energy, so I'm moving a lot, right? But that's a good thing because everything else is static and it adds to the environment, but it keeps their attention locked on you. And same with the centering and the sides, right? So how you frame your shot is super important. Low contrast versus high contrast. Letting stuff in the background sort of fade away in the way you design it, in the colors, the brightness, the textures, and all that stuff we're going to get into. And kind of the rest of it, we can come back if we have time. And so in order to do all that stuff, right, we have these different components, starting with the lens, but also how we design our background, how we do our lighting that we're going to go into also. And with each of these steps, just keep coming back to what I said before about the depth, right? So with our lens, we're really crafting the image here. And the fundamental choice we need to figure out is which lens am I going to use or buy, right? And this is just 5 lenses, but there's probably thousands of lenses on the market. And it's really confusing because they can cost between, a lens you get for free from some garage sale to $2,000, $4,000. So to demystify this just a little bit for you, you're choosing your lens for a couple factors, but one of them being your field of view. So all of you are, or most of you, I should say, are probably trying to film within your house or your office space. You're trying to come up with a studio setup that looks pretty good in a limited space constraint. And so this is one thing that's going to be super important for you, is to consider what field of view your lens is going to have. If you have a super wide lens, you can come closer to the camera, right, and be filming in a space that's not as big and still be able to see everything like you can over here on the left. Whereas if you're filming with a narrower lens or like a longer one that looks more like a telescope, that's going to mean that you're going to be a lot more zoomed in, and you're going to get a different set of pros and cons with each of these. And so we're going to go through just a little bit of this to help you understand kind of what you're looking at when you're making this decision. Okay, so real quick, just to make sure we're all on the same page, if some of you already know this, please bear with me. But the way we talk about lenses, most of it is we just look at the focal length. Again, this is a little bit of an oversimplification, but you're looking at, on the left side is like the more wider lenses, the more fisheye looking ones, the lower numbers, and the higher numbers you go, the more telescopic it is. So pretty much, again, to oversimplify, focal length is how zoomed in your lens looks. Excuse me. So this is just an example of what you might get with each of these lenses, but this is, again, very oversimplified. The other thing to pay attention to, this is really where the magic of lenses starts to come into play. Because most people know you can turn your lens, zoom in and zoom out, and it changes the picture. But this is one thing that blew my mind when I first started to understand this. And this is different focal lengths will warp your space differently. So for instance, I'm filming on a slightly wider lens right now. And you can see that my face is a little bit, it's like slightly pulled back, versus if I shot on a longer lens, my face would be pulled forward. And this is okay, this is a lot to get into, but we'll cover that in a second. Pretty much with shorter focal lengths, what you're getting is you're able to pull that space and make it into this, almost like this visual that the user falls into. Because if you can see with the girl on the left, everything seems so deep behind her, right? And so you get that kind of look that you get in a vlog or something that's more personal, right? On the other side, you have something which is a longer focal length, which makes the background come a little bit closer and expanded, right? And we'll get into in a couple seconds how you can actually use these to change how you're setting up your background. So actually, I won't jump into that yet. We'll save it for in a second. But you can kind of see how the space that you're creating for your audience is very different, right? And fundamentally, when you're creating your space, you're trying to create a place where your viewer feels like they belong and where they're taken care of. And that's what's going to keep them wanting to come back and engaging with you, versus somewhere that feels really uncomfortable and hostile. You just kind of naturally don't want to be in those spaces. And so that's a big reason we kind of make these decisions the way we do. And so on the left, we have more perspective, but you'll notice there's less blur because of the shorter focal length. On the right side, you get more blur, so it looks more cinematic and softer and nicer to the eyes, but there's less perspective. So you can kind of go through and think about your brand and like what matters more to you. And this is the key thing that I wanted to share with you all. When you have not enough space, for instance, to paint your background or something, you can make use of this really interesting thing that happens when you use different focal lengths. So on the left, I'm shooting on a wide lens. On the right side, I'm zoomed in a lot more. And notice I've pulled my camera back so that I'm still the same size in each shot. But however, when I step out of the picture, realize how much different size of the background is visible. So if I'm shooting on the right side, I only have to paint about half as much of the wall as on the left side. So if you're in a place where you have a bunch of stuff on the sides and you only have a tiny bit of wall to play with, to paint or you just can't move like a fridge right there or something. You don't want it in the shot. Play with different lenses to see what you can do. Okay, so enough on that. We have a lot to cover. So camera settings. I wanted to give you all a super quick cheat sheet of all the settings that I personally use whenever I'm filming stuff, so that hopefully this is of use to you all. Can't really explain all of it in super detail, but really quick, frame rate, you want to make sure you're filming at 24 frames a second. And the reason why you want to do this is because in Hollywood, that has been the most common used frame rate for the longest amount of time. And it's sort of like when you listen to a record crackle or you pop a soda, there's a certain feel to it that just makes you feel like it's quality. And that's what Hollywood has done with 24 frames a second. It's very close to what our eye sees, but Hollywood has just made it the standard of what looks good. So if you want to have that kind of feel, that amount of motion blur that you see on a Hollywood screen, go with 24 frames a second. Your camera might say 23.976 or something like that, but just whatever's closest to 24. And then because of that, you want to set your shutter speed to 1/50. And then we can go over that later if we have time about why, but just memorize that if not. And then your aperture, you want to set your aperture of your lens as low as possible. So you want the maximum amount of light coming into your camera to blur your background out as much as you can. And then your ISO, start at the lowest. And don't worry if that doesn't make any sense. Just memorize this and come back to this, because when you're shooting in manual, that's usually the best quality that you can get. And then you can kind of adjust from there. Okay, so let me take a sip of water real quick. I don't want to lose my voice.
Well deserved. I actually just took a note on those frame settings. That was something I didn't know. So it was a very, very useful point for this workshop host.
Thanks, man. Appreciate the feedback. And also seeing all your comments. Appreciate you guys hanging in there. I know a lot of this can be technical, so I'm trying to get to everything and not keep it boring and technical all the time. Okay, so this is the fun part. So when it comes to designing a studio, people often ask me, what is the most important thing that you need to design a studio? And most people think it's the camera or the lens. But honestly, I would say the majority of what most people need and are not taking advantage of is lighting. And that's because the camera really only captures whatever's there. It can sort of blur out the background to a certain extent, but you're essentially trying to figure out what to show on the camera. And lighting helps you to do amazing kind of magical things with that. And I'll kind of explain how we go about doing that. And so this is a pretentious picture of me showing off my studio. And there's really 5 parts to a Hollywood cinematic type of lighting that you can get in your own space without having an entire film crew, right? You can just set this up and leave it there like I do. And you have this thing ready to film at any point in time. And real quick, I think my video is getting a little bit dark, or a little bit bright, I think because the sun came out. Let me turn this up a little bit. Okay, is that better? Might be the software automatically brightening me up. Anyways, so when we get into lighting, I want to experiment with kind of explaining it in a different way than most people. Most people just give you the information, but to give you more context, there's 5 elements that we play with when we start lighting a scene. And you can see me adding to them here one by one. But kind of going along with the whole campfire theme, I think it's really important to understand kind of from a human level why we do each of these things. So first off with the key light, right? If you're not lighting yourself properly, you're not giving the viewer your full face for them to connect with. We as human beings connect with faces, and if it's really garbled, it's a lot harder for our subconscious minds to latch on and form a relationship. And so that's why the key light is the most important light you have, because ideally you're lighting about 75% of your face with this one light source. And there's different things that you want to pay attention to, but you want it to be a large diffuse light source to make sure that you look, number 1, as good as possible, but also number 2, just like visible so people can connect with you. So number 1 is you want to be seen. And number 2 is you want to avoid shadows. So as human beings, if we see someone with their hands closed, right, like this, we feel like they're not fully putting themselves out there, and we don't really trust them as much. So this is kind of the reason why in Hollywood, if you look at all these villains, they're lit with massive shadows on their face. And naturally, again, a lot of this is associations. We subconsciously come to these conclusions. When you see someone with a bunch of shadows on their face, you don't really jump to trusting them as quickly as someone who is just lit in a way where you can fully see who they are, because you know that they're not hiding anything. And so number 2 is what I call the side light, because it's on the side and there's different ways you can use it. Some people, if they use it in a certain way, they call it a fill light, but I just call it the side light. So that's number 2, building trust with your audience. So you can see, sorry, I forgot to point out, on this slide, on the top right, that's kind of the key light that I use. Here on the top right, here's an example of the side light that I'm using and sort of how I positioned everything on the top right. And then for number 3, whenever you're trying to connect with someone, there has to be sort of this reason, this importance of, okay, hold on, this person is going to be doing something that's interesting. I should pay attention, right? Otherwise, there's no reason to just click off and just go do something else. So for this, we want to use a top light. And it kind of, number 1, it helps to separate you from the background, but it also makes you feel like you're sort of this, it's like a spotlight putting you on a stage in a way, but also like in a museum. Because when, again, with association, when we see people and things lit that way, we feel like we're sitting at a show and we're waiting for something to happen, and it makes your audience lean in a little bit. So that's why I use what you can see on the top right side. That's like a little battery-powered LED light I use above my head to create that effect. I don't know if you can see right now, the sun might be a little bit bright, but it's shining on the top of my head. And then we have number 4, the background, right? When we're connecting with people, we don't just want to connect with the person, we want to have context. And this is what the background does, it provides context. So you can see on this left side, that's me without me lit, but just the background. And it gives the person a sense, the person watching this, a sense of where you are in space, what you're doing potentially, what kind of environment you're inviting them into. And what this does is it provides this context for you to build that relationship with your audience. And then finally, this is, I think, okay, I said the first one was the most important. I think this is actually maybe tied for most important. This is what's called practicals. These are the lights that actually show up in your set. So you want to make sure you have these because number 1, they make it really nice because you can really blow out the blur to make them look really nice and juicy. But also, if you're like me and like to play with these warm colored lights, it introduces intention, right? Like when you look at let's say a hotel lobby, and one is on a really cool, bright daytime day, and one is with the fireplace on, it's warm and cozy. You get a very different intention there that it creates because the warmth creates this sense of we're together, we're safe, we're cozy, and it's not a professional atmosphere. It's very much a laid back friend atmosphere and family. So by using different types of practicals, you can create that kind of look in your shots too. And so, you don't have to just use these little hanging lights that I have, but you can also use the stuff that you see on the top right. And just like find interesting ways to introduce warm lights, if possible, into the backgrounds of your scenes. Oh, I forgot I had another kind of like more written up here. And pretty much what it does is it helps to also motivate the lighting that you have. And yeah, it creates a lot of depth within the background as well. So again, you're thinking about layers and layers of depth. Okay, and then you end up with something that may or may not look something like this. And then color scheme. So another question I get a lot of the times, especially on YouTube, is what color should I paint my background? And that is a really good question because I think just by asking that question, you're really moving in the right direction. Most people, they'll take a video of something, they'll take a video of themselves and they won't think too much about the background color and they'll just stick with the normal eggshell wall that they have. And depending on your skin tone, that could be a good choice or a bad choice. But by not asking that question, it leaves a lot of room for just like a very mediocre type of shot. Sorry to call you out, Aaron. But it's like, if you're not thinking about that, you're leaving a lot on the table. Because what happens, again, remember with the visual separation pairs I talked about earlier to create depth, you can have, for instance, a darker color contrasting if you have lighter skin, right? Or the opposite, if you have darker skin, having a lighter color, that helps you build that contrast so the eye snaps to you. Or you can also play with cool and warm colors. Our eyes snap to warm and kind of move away from cool. So that's another way to bring the audience's attention to your face, to keep their minds from wandering too. And so we're gonna get into that in a second. But this is really the importance of color scheme here. Oh, and one more thing, also just in context of where the person's seeing the video, if you know that your website and your brand are a certain color, having it designed in a way where the viewer's scanning down the page and the video fits in with that color scheme is also a really powerful way to say like, hey, everything is so well designed. We're here, we're taking care of you. It's kind of just a package deal, you know? And so how do we choose our color scheme? Well, I think it starts by noting, if you look at most of the pictures that catch your eye, it's interesting. When I first noticed this, it kind of blew my mind. Most eye-catching images intentionally choose to exclude certain colors. It's not about jamming as many colors as you possibly can into a shot. So you can see here on the left, there are no greens or pinks or bright purples. It's really these two on the left colors, right? You have this orangish tan and this darker charcoal, plus like a lighter version of that gray. So you see on all these examples, it's mostly, in this case, actually, mostly like just one color on the two right side images, plus a bunch of grays. Excuse me. And on the other side, right, if you ever just randomly take a photo with your iPhone and wonder why it doesn't look that good, it could be potentially that the colors in the photo themselves are not intentionally chosen. So most sets have only two main colors. So if you take a look at all of the YouTubers and course creators that you like and follow, think about what colors they're actually using. And you might actually be surprised at how few the color choice they have is, how few colors, well, you know what I'm saying. And it's kind of a good practice exercise to realize you don't have to jam as many colors as you possibly can. And the way to pick your two colors is you usually have a split between one warm color and one cool color. And the reason for this is because, sorry to switch, to jump real quick. There's this thing called complementary colors. So colors on this color wheel here, it's like hypothetically the scientific way to see colors. When you have colors that are directly opposite each other, they work very well. And there's a bunch of other different ways that you could go about this, but complementary colors is probably one of the easiest ways to think about it. And you just pick two colors that are opposite each other, and those tend to pair really well together. But then there's also one other thing to pay attention to. Skin tones are all, even though like they're different tones and different brightnesses, they're all on the same rough color side of the spectrum, right? They're all between this yellowish orange. And that's really good news for us, because that means we can design for skin tones relatively universally, you know, in terms of picking a bunch of colors. And this is why, for me, I often recommend people pick something that is this sort of orangish paired with this kind of a bluish color, because one warm color works with our skin tones really well. And you can see these are two sets that I've done in the past. You can see that I play with my warm color being my skin color and this wood and lighting color, and the cool color being this bluish or maybe slightly greenish color that I choose in the background. So you can really get creative with this, but it helps to start with a starting point. And another thing to pay attention to, whether you're picking your brand colors or picking the wall colors, your whole set is going to give a certain feel. And if you have a predominant color in that scene, you're going to affect the viewer's psychology very differently. So for instance, if you have something that's super bright yellow, that's kind of jarring, right? It shows caution in some cases, or if it's like a warmer one, it might be friendly or youthful, right? But you probably wouldn't talk about something super serious with a bright yellow color in the background. Whereas something like a blue communicates trust, which is why most banks have a color blue in them. Or red, right? Danger, romance, leadership, passion. So really just be conscious about the colors you're choosing and think about, how does this affect my audience's psychology and the relationship I'm trying to build with them? What am I saying without saying anything about who I am and what this relationship is going to be like? Did I skip a slide? No, okay, we're good. Okay, and then so once you figure out your color scheme, you're gonna want to find some way to color the wall behind you. And although the best way is to paint your wall, it can be kind of difficult for some people if you're renting or something. And so if you do paint, make sure you go with a non-glossy matte finish, so the reflections of the light looks a little bit better. Or if you have gels, these are little plastic color sheets that go in front of your lights that allow you to change the color of any light that you have. Or you can get an RGB light that's just an LED light with different colors in it. Or you can play with the wallpaper, which is like a stick and peel type of thing where you can put it on and rip it back off, hopefully without damaging your wall. And yeah, ideally you want to paint, but then if you can't, wallpaper, and if you can't do that, then play with gels. So there are a lot of different options that you can play with. Okay, cool. Background design. Let's see. Okay, hold on, I had some notes here. Okay, so now it's time to pick your background elements. And I think this is the fun part because you really start to get to take this really boring background and turn it into a space, turn it into like a set that you would see in Hollywood. And if you don't have any sort of interior design experience, like I had none of that. I was an engineer and I thought like, oh, no one does that stuff. But then when I started trying to figure this out, I had no idea what to do. And it's pretty difficult and intimidating if you don't have sort of like guidelines to follow. And so just a couple I kind of picked out from the course here for you guys. Number one, look for plants, because plants surprisingly do a lot for your psychology. You introduce like kind of this calming element in your scene, but it also makes you feel more mature and smart about what you're doing, right? Like you look at a plant and like, wow, this person, Kevin's so smart. He's got plants. He must be super cool and everything, have his life together. And what it also does is it creates the sense of depth in your background. So instead of just being you and a flat background, it creates this really interesting textured surface with so many different places where lights can create light and shadow. And that helps bring your space to life a lot more than just a flat wall. Let's see, wood, right? This is very similar to skin color because you have different types of wood, different lightnesses and darknesses, but they're all, again, very similar to the color of skin, right? Between that orangish to yellowish color. And you can use this to play around with your skin color in the overall visuals that you're creating. And we're going to get to that in a moment. But then think about getting furniture to add more texture and stuff sticking out of the background so that it's not just, again, a flat thing. You want to create that depth. Okay, so this is, I think, another fun piece where how do we, once we have these elements, right? So you got a bunch of stuff to look all cool and stuff. How do you put it into your background? So you want to make sure you're not making a mistake of just kind of just piling them all, off in the corner, saying like, hey, I'm rich, I can afford all this cool stuff, but it looks totally bad and worse than if you hadn't done that, because now it just looks, right, like it's just thrown together. So what we do is we take some principles, some design principles into account here. And so the first one being balance. So you want to find symmetry, right? So in my set, I have like my couch here. If you kind of cut my scene down the middle, it feels roughly balanced. And not just vertically, but also horizontally as well, right? A lot of people make the mistake of, again, putting a whole bunch of stuff down below in the bottom half of the screen, and then there's nothing at all in the walls, nothing above them, and it just looks really off, right? Because you're not just watching the bottom half of the video, you're watching the entire screen. So you want to make sure that your scene is well balanced. So you can also balance using different attributes. You want to balance for intensity. So intensity could be the brightness of a color matched with the size of an object, or how eye-catching and contrasting something is paired with some other, brightness or warmth or something like that. So you want to play with, like in this case, I have a big tree thing, but it's kind of dark and not as contrasty, right? But then I have this painting over here that you can see, which is smaller, but it's also brighter and more contrasting. So they sort of balance each other out in that regard. And then another one, rhythm. This is kind of an interesting one. When you're positioning objects, remember what I said about the wood and how it sort of brings your skin color when designed correctly. It brings that into the scene, and also with these orange glowy lights too. We're playing with this sense of rhythm. And what rhythm is it's repetition. Just like in music, when you hear like a beat, right? You know what to expect. You know that it's something that's just constantly flowing through the whole thing. It's this ever-present thing, this element that you're aware of. And so rhythm, when it comes to designing a studio background, is when you have these repeating elements, whether they're repeating textures, repeating shapes, or in my case, I really like to play with repeating colors. So if you kind of look here, I'm playing with the orange color. So obviously my face, I won't say orange, but you get what I'm saying. And then your eye goes, okay, here's something, and oh, there's another thing with the same color. Your eye darts down to that little wooden man thing, and then probably the stool underneath it, and then goes to my arm, and then goes up to my other arm, and then goes to the light on the wall, and then the other light, or not on the wall, like hanging here. So you can see now, because there's a lot of things that are very sort of grouped together, your brain starts to hop between them. And so if, as you do, hopefully not right now, but like most people get bored when they're watching you talk on a video. And if you don't have something to keep their brain interested, they're gonna leave and click onto something else. instead of staying within the frame and looking at all the stuff that you've designed to catch their attention and bring it back, right? And that's one reason rhythm is so powerful. It's one tool we use to accomplish that. And so, yeah, try to find ways to repeat certain elements within your frame if you can. And then another one, harmony. So harmony essentially just means the items that you choose should make sense together in the same space, right? You wouldn't want to have, I don't know, something from the 1700s and something super futuristic, right? Those things wouldn't really make sense together. So it doesn't have to be super drastic, like perfect. But for instance, what I did, I have this lounge lighting plus wall art. Again, I'm trying to create this sort of a campfire feel where people don't feel like they have to be anyone else, where they feel like they're understood and can just be like human beings, right? And then I have a cozy pillow and like quote unquote smart decor, because I like to talk about stuff that goes deeper than just, like regurgitating information that everyone else is regurgitating, like trying to think about life and be more intentional in that way. So in this sense, everything kind of fits the goal. And again, back to the cinematic design pyramid, right? I'm trying to communicate and guide the viewer's attention and kind of create this space with that in mind. And so if you're ever confused, one shortcut that you can do to get harmony is to pick a bunch of stuff that makes that sorry, to rephrase, if you don't know how to make all your items fit together, you can kind of flip that problem on its head and just kind of think of it as, let me just go buy stuff that would make sense together in the first place. So the way you can do that is to look for stuff that all center around a specific design style. So an industrial style you can see on the left is kind of like this factory brushed metal look, a lot of black metals and really rusty looking stuff. And then you have mid-century modern, that's another style that looks really good, very common YouTuber and course creator aesthetic. Then you have Scandinavian, and then if you want to play with something more like a gamer feel or more high tech, you can play with the neon vibe. And all the stuff that you pick should sort of come together on its own into this harmonious feeling without you having to have to know, does this match this, right? Because not all of us have that background. I certainly didn't. And it's either you guess and check and you just experiment for a long time and spend a lot of time and a lot of money doing that, or you can kind of take shortcuts like this. So there's more that we can get into later if we have time. But I wanted to jump forward real quick. So I think a lot of this, like I just mentioned, can be very overwhelming because most of us, like me included, you're probably on this workshop because you want to know how to create videos so you can build your business, build your following, and just get started making content. And then every step of the way, you get hit with this other roadblock. Like right now, oh my God, I got to set up a set. I got to set up lighting. I got to set up my background. Oh no, now I got to learn interior design. Like that's so hard. Now I got to paint my wall. What am I going to do? Where am I going to put my camera? And all this stuff can get really frustrating. And kind of as someone who's walked through that many times and helped a lot of people through it, I want to remind you of one thing, that the creative process, and you've probably seen a variation of this before, the creative process isn't a straight line. We think it's a straight line because the start and end points look roughly straight, but that middle part is really, really frustrating and very hard to navigate. So you'll normally start here, go over there, and think, okay, let me just try something. Some of it works, and oh my God, some of it doesn't. I'm doomed. I'm not cut out for this. Let me just completely abandon the half year of work I put into this. And I just want to encourage you, for those of you who have tried and felt discouraged on your studio or are kind of just in this process in general, that the way out is to keep trying something new, right? Try to seek advice like you're doing here on this workshop. This is awesome. It's giving yourself more of these, I like to call them like creative mutations. You just mutate it, try something new, see what works, leave what doesn't work, mutate that a couple times, and you just keep trying. Because remember, you can paint your wall again. You can return a piece of furniture you got if it doesn't fit. You can change your lenses, right? You can move your camera stuff around. So you have flexibility to play with. And again, it is this guess and check process because right, creation is by nature uncertain. It's venturing into creating something new. And so if it was all spelled out, we wouldn't have the benefit of getting to have all this impact that we have and create all this cool stuff. So yeah, And also, yeah, so I know there's a lot to cover, but we're already at the 40-minute mark. So we're a little bit short on time here, but I wanted to leave some room for Q&A, and wanted to just let you know that there is a lot of stuff that I'm trying to make available to everybody, everyone that I talk to and help with this stuff. And I tried to jam it all into this course that doesn't really fit on like a 1-hour workshop. And so if you're interested, it's at dreamstudiocourse.com. And you can see that these people on the left side are wonderful people who are gutsy enough to let me put their before pictures on the left side of the screen, so you can see what their studios looked like before. And I think that's all of us. My studios used to look like that. And going through the material, they ended up with something that looked more like on the right. And yeah, so in the course, we go through a lot of the stuff that we skipped through and didn't have time for here, as well as going through a lot more detail. I actually break down how I set up 4 different studios in this single room that all look very different. And I walk through, I actually measure everything out for you and tell you where everything is placed, the exact gear I use, the lighting, the settings. And so if this is something that's holding you back, where either you don't like what your studio looks like and you're just like, I just want to get past this so that I can start making my content, this is holding me back. I actually made this with folks like you in mind, because that's who I was in the beginning, to be honest. And it's a course for beginner and intermediate video creators. So if you like the stuff that we talked about here, it's going to be right up your alley. And let me see, just to make sure I'm not missing anything.
Well, one thing I wanted to add, Kevin, is I actually just popped in the YouTube chat the link to Kevin's class as well. It's also in the YouTube description, and it should be pinned as a YouTube comment. Also, for anyone who registered for this workshop, we'll send that out after as well. Again, to repeat, we're going to get to Q&A in a few minutes. So, Kevin, actually, while we talk about your class for a few more minutes, I've already seen a bunch of questions come in. But if anyone else has any questions they'd like to get in, this would be the time to put them in the YouTube chat or wherever you're watching this. That way we can try to get to as many as we could before the workshop is over. So to repeat, that link to Kevin's class is in the YouTube chat. It's also in the YouTube description. And for anyone who registered for this workshop, we'll send it out after as well. So, you should have ample opportunity to access that. Any words you want to add on that? And if not, we could start hopping into these questions, because there's a ton of them from the audience.
Cool. Thanks, man. No, I was just kind of like, I was trying to find my mental bearings, so I'm glad you jumped in. That was perfect.
We got you. So folks, I apologize if I don't go in any particular order for these questions. I'll try to grab as many as I could. I just know some came in during the course of Kevin's workshop. So one of the first ones I want to grab, Kevin, is, one second, this one right here. We have a question here. If you can't see it, let me read it for everyone. It's, can you please go over the difference between like a large 18-inch ring light and 3-point lighting, pros and cons? Just, do you have any opinions on this? Can you weigh in a little bit?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. Thanks for asking that. So that's a question I get a lot, actually. A lot of people will buy a ring light because that's what they see on YouTube and see a lot of people using. But to be honest, if you think about it, right, like a ring light is just a light source that's about this big in diameter. And the reason you would want a ring light is if your face is super close to the camera. And if I'm right here and I have an 18-inch ring light, that can shine at me from all different directions and act almost like a 3-point light source, because it's coming at me from different areas. But when you're creating something like a studio where you want to be talking to the camera, right, and you're about this big in the screen, the only way to get that nice lighting with a ring light is to have it right here. So it would be in the shot and look really weird, you talking through a ring light. And so I try to recommend against it, to be honest. It's much better to get like what I have here. You saw the slide. Come on, where is it? With something big like this, like a key light, like a softbox, because it's about 2 times as big and will give you a lot more of this even lighting from a farther distance. So hopefully that answers your question. I noticed a couple comments that I wanted to just address super quick. If you guys have any questions of specifically what gear I use, I'm still trying to figure this out, but there's a chance that I might just I have this whole gear list in the course that talks about all the specific gear that you guys might want to use. So if that's of any use to you guys and we don't get to your questions here, definitely feel free to look at that, because that should answer your questions. Yeah.
Well, and thank you for that, Kevin. Another question, which I have as well, so thank you for the multiple folks who asked this, is, yeah, just speaking to lighting and wearing glasses. Like I've tried a ring light before and I wear glasses. Sometimes there's like some nasty glare, just, best practices, ways of like making that look as good as possible. Like obviously you're wearing glasses and you look terrific.
Thanks, man. Yeah, great question. You look terrific too, by the way. So I think with lighting, there's a couple different things. And if you just kind of think about it from a first principles perspective, you're going to get a reflection in the camera whenever you have a light source and it's bouncing off your glasses that happen to be at the correct angle for that to go into the camera. And so if you're looking straight at the camera, the only way you're going to get that lighting bouncing straight into your camera, if your glasses are, assuming flat, is if the light is directly in front of you. So honestly, the ring light is going to give you the most direct glare into the camera because it's reflecting from the camera back to the camera. Whereas if you set it up kind of like I recommend with the studio lighting, you have a light kind of on the side, right? You can see on the top right corner here, this is kind of, again, one thing I kind of go through. You have the light off to the side a little bit and another light off to that side. So you're fully illuminated, but the lighting is not coming from directly in front of your camera. Right? And it's also good because when you have a light coming directly at you, you look sort of like a deer in headlights. There's absolutely no shadow on your face. So you look very 2D and not interesting to look at at all. So by having your lights spread out in this way, it does you a couple different favors. Number one being, right, that your glasses don't have as much glare. And the other thing, I'm not completely sure, but I'm pretty sure that if you have a larger light source like this, even if you do get that reflection, it doesn't make it as harsh compared to like a super strong spotlight that many people use, right? They'll just put a really harsh light next to their face. And because all that light is concentrated into one dot, that becomes a really distracting dot on your face through your glasses. Whereas if it's kind of bigger and spread out, it's more, it's not as distracting, if that makes sense.
Thank you for that. I mean, I think that's super useful information. And as a follow-up question, because you just kind of talked about large, the setting up studio lighting versus kind of this like focused point of light from a ring light. The next question, just to bring it up, is lighting recommendations for larger spaces. Like say if you're a creator who's filming workout videos or something where you're moving and interacting, any thoughts on this?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So again, the principles hold true, right? You still want to make use of all the 5 principles that I mentioned, but to get those different effects, you're just going to use different equipment. So, excuse me. For instance, if you want to talk about your key light, right? So in this case, I'm using one that's about 3 feet in diameter because I'm only showing this much of my body, and it's like about arm's length away right now. So it doesn't have to be that big. But if you want to show your whole body and you're farther away from your camera, you can use a larger softbox. They actually sell some that are, I think, 4 or even more feet, tall and wide. And for you metric folks, I think that's like 120 centimeters. So you can get a bigger softbox. That'll help a lot more. But also you can kind of find other ways to light yourself with a larger surface area. So for instance, have multiple softboxes. If you feel like your feet aren't getting enough light, you can buy another one and put it under, right? As long as they're the same light quality and same color temperature. You can also make use of what is called a book light, where you shine a harsh light source at something that's just a bright white shower curtain or what's called a bounce board. And then that becomes a light source that now reflects onto you. So there's different ways to get creative. You can also shine lights at your ceiling or at a wall, and that'll do the same thing. And pretty much what you're trying to do is just follow these principles of making sure that you can be seen, making sure there's not a lot of shadows on you. Those are the 2 main things. After that, everything else is just decoration. Yeah.
Thank you, Kevin. Next question is around virtual backgrounds. How do you feel about using virtual backgrounds on a green screen? Any input or advice on this?
Yeah, so that's a good question. It depends on what you're going for. So if you're a gamer, then it might be advantageous because then you could overlay yourself onto the game that you're trying to show. And a lot of internet culture likes these weird, like not perfectly cut out green screen, right? But right now, technology isn't at the place where I don't know if it's AI, but just like basically when it automatically cuts you out with the green screen, you often have to do it manually to get it perfect. And this is why the computer doesn't do a really perfect job. So you'll either get some parts of you cut out where you don't want it to be cut out, or you'll get a lot of this green tinting on you because of that green screen behind you. So I normally don't recommend it. For your channel, it sounds like you're doing money type stuff, and it's a bit more, I would say, probably more of a crafted look than a glitchy internet look, I'm guessing. And so under that assumption, I would recommend not using a green background because it doesn't look as trustworthy and as mature as you probably want for the best results for your audience. But if you don't have any other option, I'd say like it's something to play with. But you would want to get your green screen as far back as possible so it's not splashing any green lighting on you. Yeah.
Thank you, Kevin. There's a personal question, the next one, and it's, where did you get your lounge lighting, right?
Yeah. This honestly is just IKEA. I didn't start off really knowing anything about interior design, so I just went cheap. So I went to IKEA and I saw these things hanging, so I thought, okay, $10. And yeah, that's something you can find. Yeah, I'm still trying to figure out whether or not to make the whole gear list public as just kind of a freebie. But if I do, I can probably, Aaron, can we email that out?
At the very least, I could put it in the course. Like we could put it in the course after, and we could put it in the replay on the page. So yeah, if it's bullet points or like hyperlinks out to gear, we'll find a way to make sure people could access it. And we could put it on the course description. We could put it on the replay page, and we'll try to put it in the email as well. So if you have it ready, we can help as much as we possibly could.
Okay. Yeah. So if we can send that out, if I end up doing that, then you can find it there. But otherwise, it's just an IKEA light.
Cool. And I think some of the next questions, there's a bunch of them around kind of starting out, and like obviously, you work up to a certain level of budgetary items. Let me just grab one of these questions. If you're just starting out, what would you recommend? Like, what are like the foundational elements as you start to really upgrade your production studio?
Yeah, that's a great question. So number one, it's really about what effect you're getting, right? And you can sort of supplement different pieces of gear to get the same effect. And you're oftentimes trading between ease of setup, right? Like I can set up this softbox in 30 seconds versus if you have a much cheaper thing, it might take you 10, 15 minutes to set up, different things to reflect different things. But to kind of think about it this way, you want to make sure that you have some sort of key light. I think that's number one, most important. You don't want to be lighting yourself with a little bed lamp or something, or a flashlight even. That would look really bad. And so you want to find some way to get that key light look. And now how you do it could be a way that you save money. So I would kind of reframe your question, and instead of saying which item should you buy, think about more so, how can I get the same results for all of these elements by using the stuff that you already have or can kind of get for cheap, if that makes sense. And there's a whole bunch of stuff you can get with different budgeting levels. And I also explain that in the course, if that's helpful as well.
Well, with that, right, talking about items we have, a couple different folks asked specifically about using the smartphones. This question's about using a smartphone resolution with 1080p, but I saw a couple different questions around, using an iPhone 12, like, because there's so many new settings. Just any thoughts on this or best practices to at least incorporate that into the workflow?
Yeah, great question. So kind of piggybacking on the other one, definitely use whatever gear you have to start with. Don't let it stop you from creating content, because that's the most important thing. Now, if you're thinking about optimizing, I would say you probably want to get a better camera with like a DSLR or a mirrorless, because really the way the physics of light works is we as humans really like this blurry background because that's how our eyes see stuff, right? But it takes a certain sensor size to actually get that kind of a quality of result. So the size of the sensor and the size of lens are what allows us to blur the things out and make it look nice. So with an iPhone, you only have a tiny little sensor and a tiny lens. So on its own, it's not going to give you that kind of blur that you're looking for. So you're not going to be able to get that Hollywood look. It'll look more like a webcam. But the thing is that the software is getting a little bit better. So they're getting better at cutting you out and blurring out the background with software. But last I checked, even with the iPhone 12, is not perfect at this point. So that's usually kind of a trade-off that you're just thinking like, okay, is it worth me spending this much money to get this amount of blur? And a lot of it kind of depends on your own content, right? Or in your own context. I would often say you should try to go for the best of the best. But if that's going to prevent you from making content, then definitely do with what you have, and just take that iPhone and learn to use the software settings that gives you a blurry background if you can. and just kind of see if that's good enough for you. And if you don't like it, switch it back. But just know that these are the tools you have available to play with.
Couldn't agree more. So you just want to repeat it from, not the professional side to someone who also makes content. So many videos I've made, some of the best moments are things that were like spur of the moment with an iPhone. But like as I've gotten better, obviously I wanted to upgrade my setup and like don't let the gear be the reason you don't start creating content. But I would hope this workshop is to level up all of those assets. This is my key thing. I want to make sure people know.
Yeah.
Another question that came up is around audio, because your microphone, you sound really, really clear, right? So can you share a bit about just what's your audio setup, any recommendations?
Yeah, right now I'm using my laptop, just like just the typical video chat.
Sounds good.
Yeah, but what I actually have down here, I don't know if you can see on my screen, I have this microphone down here. It's a shotgun mic, and I go through the course too and talk about this, but pretty much what you want with your audio is you kind of want to create that depth too. You want to make sure that you stand out and your background kind of fades away. Any air conditioning sounds, any sounds of your chair, all that stuff. You want to make sure that you have that depth in audio. And the function of it is to make you actually sound more charismatic. So I recommend people getting something like this, which is let's see if I can actually pull it off. This is a shotgun microphone right here. And this is kind of what they use in Hollywood. You don't have to get something that's this fancy, but you want a mic that's going to be able to let you capture good sound from a distance. Because unless you're doing a podcast where you have a mic right here, you need something that's going to be off camera. And so a shotgun mic is going to be your best bet, or a little lavalier lapel mic right here that you can clip on if you're okay with it being in the shot. That's going to allow you to get the best quality sound when you're recording. And it's going to allow you to also boost the power of your voice without having to talk super loud. So that's another thing where we associate not having to try as hard as being more charismatic, right? If you can talk without feeling like you're straining, people kind of trust you more. They feel like you're just more natural. So having the right kind of mic actually helps you to do that. I hope that answers the question. That makes sense?
I think so, Kevin. Just grabbing a few more because we are starting to run a bit tight on time. Just one quick one. What's your actual focal length right now? The lens you're shooting with today?
Yeah, sorry, let me put this back on screen. Yeah, so right now I'm using the 24 millimeter f1.4 lens, the Sigma, if that makes sense.
Got it.
Camera. I don't know how detailed you want it.
And if there's follow-up questions, try to put them. Kevin can see these questions after too, folks. So he'll have access to the YouTube chat. Let me grab another question here. I saw one around windows, right? I think this is a pretty common question. Is if you're shooting and your backdrop has windows, any best practices, if that's the only setup you have, what do you recommend?
Yeah, great question. One thing too, also, if I don't get to your question, feel free to connect with me. Like, honestly, feel free to email me. I'm going to try to get back to everybody. Yeah, Instagram, Twitter, whatever you want. I'm going to try to be as helpful as I possibly can. And so for Windows, that's a really good question, because as you can see right now, my shot doesn't actually look as good as it did when we started. Right? It's an hour later, and the sun conditions have actually changed. So it is not something I typically recommend if you're doing any kind of content that's going to take you more than about 10 minutes to film. Right? Not talking about 10-minute long content, which can take up to 20 to 60 minutes to film, talking about like the filming time. So you can use Windows as part of your lighting if it's in just a really short amount of time, because it's going to change really quickly with clouds and stuff like that. Now, in terms of getting the windows in your background, you can actually make it work by lighting yourself really bright. So the problem people have when they have windows in their background is it's so bright outside that if your camera wants to resolve to see what's outside, it's going to have to darken everything so that it's not just searingly bright white outside. But when it does that, you're going to become very dark, right? And so you're trying to make a trade-off of which one do I expose for, it's called. But what you do to remedy that is you just light yourself very bright. Or you can actually even take some sort of almost like a sunglasses type of film and put it over your window so that it cuts down some of that lighting coming in. So if it's something that you want to go through all that trouble for, you can get like a film, I think it would be called a neutral density film. And you just tape it on the outside of your window, probably somewhere where you can't see it. And it'll just cut the amount of light coming in. So you're able to resolve for both areas on camera at the same time.
Thank you so much, Kevin. So we are approaching time. Before we sign off, folks, everyone who joined today and who was here for this wonderful workshop with Kevin, please let him know in the YouTube comments that you appreciate him. If you enjoyed this workshop, say thank you in the chat. He sees these comments. I would love for him to see them after. You came here and gave this workshop for free today, so I appreciate it. And I'm sure the folks in the chat with us today did as well. With a few seconds left, Kevin, is there any parting words, any last bits of advice you wish anyone really looking to up their production game would know?
Yeah, I think just kind of going back to what I said, honestly, it's like really trying to figure out how you can achieve these things with no matter what gear you have. But also I would just like really try to like hammer home this idea that I think success really depends on the connection you build with your audience, and kind of coming at it with that sense and not trying to make it look just like another creator you follow because you think that's the formula, but really trying to create what's best for your audience and thinking about them as people and trying to help them generously. I think that's really the way that I found to actually help. It's been this really hard process for me. Like dropping your ego as a creator is a big, difficult thing, but I think that's really where, if you can start to think in that way, and I'm on that journey too, to be honest, I think that's really where your stuff starts to shine. It becomes more you rather than just copying somebody else. And also, yeah, I'm gonna also try to be available, like I said. I really appreciate everyone kind of tuning in. I know everyone's busy, so hopefully we did justice to your time today and just gave you as much as possible. I know we didn't get to go through everything though, so highly recommend the course. I might be biased, but if I honestly think, I'm not even just saying this, I think it'll help a lot of you if you're here on the call today. But I'm also gonna just try to put it into practice, just be completely generous. So like, if there are any questions you have that I can help with, I'm gonna try my best to get through as many as I can. So seriously, feel free to email me, message me, yeah, I hope to connect with many of you soon because I'm seriously rooting for you all. You all are doing something really important in the world by being there for people who need you to show up for them. And I think that's a really special thing. So yeah, appreciate you guys.
Kevin, we appreciate you too. I was a fan during this workshop as well. So we appreciate you sharing the info. Folks, we're going to sign off in just a second. Thank you so much for making time to join us today. Kevin, thank you again for sharing your knowledge and just incredible insight across this topic. With that, we'll be signing off in 3, 2, 1. Bye, everyone.
Bye.